All right. So for any of you that was at the education or training day yesterday, I really went into the details and the agronomy behind variable rate irrigation and why we do it and how we do it. Today, we're going to more focus on the software feature set itself and kind of the specific button clicks on how to create a VRI prescription and how to get to the final script itself. So if you have questions along the way, please jump in. We can make it interactive just like yesterday. But as I said, we'll be sending out kind of these video recordings also from yesterday that will have a lot more agronomic details back on why we're doing this. So to start with, who's all in, and Avi did a great demonstration of the variable rate application tool in the CropX set, and it had quite a few questions, which was good. But we introduced this tool set last year, the new VRA and VRI kind of integrated tool. Don't think a whole lot of people are using it quite yet. I have had a few comments from kind of our legacy dealers that have been running VRI for a long time and that were used to the old crop metric system that told me they really like the new interface of the CropX and says it's a whole lot easier to use and kind of has everything they need to get by with creating a prescription just like they used to. So again, all comments and feedback welcome to keep improving this. But when you go to the VRA tool, the VRA section, you're going to see you got basically three different options. One's first creating your management zones. And again, yesterday I talked a lot about the importance of starting with the right zones to start with, whether you're doing VRA or VRI. And from there, you're going to lead into the VRI. Now, if you started with create a VRI map, it's going to take you straight into creating management zones to begin with. And you'll see we've got four different options, actually. Three are shown here where we got machine data, satellite, and soil or crop zones. Machine data will bring in anything you have available. Obviously, you don't probably want to make a VRI map based off a herbicide pass. And typically, might be looking more at a yield data, which is a good start. But it will automatically bring in that yield data, for example, and zone it out for you with however many number of zones that you create or whatever many zones you select. And then the same process with satellite data. The other option is what I mentioned earlier is if you had some saved management zones. So like me personally, I like to create those management zones like we talked about yesterday, whether they're based on EC and landscape position or topography change, and create those consistent zones and save them so I can use them year after year and use them for application after application, whether it's VRI or potentially matching that up with seeding and fertilizer. But then we have a couple different methods. If we step back, and in this example, I just have the basic Sergo soil zone selected. But it's going to ask, once you bring in these zones or select your zones, which irrigation method do you want to irrigate for? Do you want to do the full point irrigation or the optimized water strategy? And so I'll explain that more in a little bit. Again, we hit on that yesterday, but we'll dive into that again today. The other option is to simply drive your own rates. And this is fairly simple. All you have to do is put in a min and a max and hit distribute, and it'll automatically distribute those rates evenly across however many number of zones you designated. And that distribute button lets you inverse those rates back and forth to make sure they align with whichever soil type you're going with. But if we dive into those two irrigation strategies again, the full point is going to make sure that we're watering every zone to its fullest capacity. Basically, with a big change with this is going to be the higher water holding capacity zones are going to receive more water because they have more capacity. There's more room in that bucket to fill up. They aim to saturate or fully fill up each zone to its fullest point. Whereas the inverse, what we call the optimized water uptake strategy, this was the original crop metrics strategy, was we're focusing on water uptake in each zone. And this in this particular example, in those higher water holding capacity zones, we're going to put less water so that we don't overwater those zones. If you remember, a lot of times the most yield influence that we often see is a decrease in yield on those heavier soil types because we're putting on too much water. So typically, at least in our world, in the Midwest, we're using that optimized water strategy the most. Any questions on those two kind of base strategies to pick from? And here's just an example of what each looks like, which I said they're really just one's an inverse of the other. We're either putting on more or less water in that heavier soil type, and then the opposite on the lighter soil types. And it's not bad, you know, in an entire application, whether you're making a variable rate application map or a VRI, you can save those VRI scripts there and choose to use them in the future or download and use them at different points in the season. So it's not bad to have an example of each one that you're prepared to use for different scenarios throughout the growing season. So once I've determined my rates and bring those into kind of the next step, the kind of the prescription generation step, we've got a lot of different kind of customization features here. And this is where it really gets into kind of the beauty of really honing in on certain soil types or particular areas of the field that you might want to customize. So the first one is the base rate. The base rate should always be what you're going to water for that majority soil type. Again, if you remember what we talked about yesterday and the importance of identifying the majority soil type, typically the base rate is going to be where that probe is located, whatever zone that probe is in. And that probe is going to really drive and determine the timing of when to start the irrigation event, as well as that base rate. At the same time, if the grower simply has a base rate that he's used to running on that particular field, that can be your base rate or your starting point for the prescription. Once that base rate is entered, all your other rates will automatically, for each individual pie slice and sector, will automatically adjust based on that initial base rate. As we move over, we've got the amplification factor. So all this does is adjust based on a percent up or down. It starts off at 1.0, and you can either go up every tenth of a point, which is just a 10% up or down, or you can move it all the way down. And that's going to adjust the entire script or every sector, every one of those pie slices within the VRI script based on that percentage accordingly. Now here's where it gets maybe a little bit trickier or allows you to do a little bit more customization is the locking feature set. So what this allows us to do is maybe we want to amplify our prescription and we only want to amplify it on the northeast corner of the field for whatever reason. We could potentially lock all of our slices except for that individual particular section of the field and then amplify that. So anytime they're locked, you can't adjust them at all. But anything unlocked can easily be adjusted by any one of these factors up here, the base rate or the amplification factor, or even the sector size, if you wanted to play with that for those unlocked slices. Again, a lot of different ways to go in and customize. I mentioned yesterday doing the triple wiper, where you can go back and across and back again on lighter soil types to put on a lower application rate, but hit it more frequently. This is a great tool to use to go in and kind of hone down on those individual sections to adjust them to whatever particular rate that you might want to get hit that 3 times. Any questions with kind of the customization aspect or any of those basic tool sets there that I just talked about? Yep, sector goes from 2 all the way up to 360. Yep. A minute, yeah. Is there any way to put a minimum and maximum rate? Um, that is a good. I know right here you set manually, you can set a min and max rate. And I'm thinking you can too. I don't think I have that highlighted though. I'll have to check. Otherwise, we should add that. That should be on this page here. I think it's at the very bottom. If you scroll all the way down, you can enter in your min and max to kind of set those outside parameters. I know I didn't highlight it here though. Exactly. Well, and that's the nice thing. So with this customization, maybe that the default values do go up to, let's say, 3 inches, but you want to cap it at an inch and a half or inch and 3/4 in our scenario. We really wouldn't go any more than that. You can use these locking features to just go and kind of drive that upper rate down. But to your point, we used to have a min and max. I think it's there, but I got to check. Otherwise, we'll add it because that's a good. You want to set both that minimum and that maximum threshold. Anything else? Yeah, great question. So, is 2 degrees too much? And is there kind of a standard with the 6 degrees? When we first started, we kind of tested anything from 1 degree up to 15, and that 6 just seemed to be the happy medium, with getting enough zone acres in each pie slice. If you got less than that, then they almost come too narrow. I will say, even when you get to 2 degrees and you look at this prescription, it ends up looking the same, even at 2 degrees. But I just like to use 6 degrees to get more area in those pie slices. In fact, the only reason it ever went more than 6 degrees was because when we first started, some of the competitors came out and just bumped their controllers up to 2 degrees just to say they were more accurate. It was all a marketing scheme, and they had no reasoning or rhyme behind it. Yeah. But really, I mean, open for questions. This went pretty fast. I can dive into anything we talked about yesterday, but from there, um, it's just going to download the prescription as a CSV file. Any of the controllers on the market then can upload or import a CSV file very easily. Um, and I think we should have a new option coming there for an API upload to the Ranky controller. That should be coming any day, actually. Yep. Right. As long as you got which controllers. Anything connected wirelessly within the last 10 years for Ranky, RC10 and above. Yep. So bad example. The Ranky guys will probably throw something at me, but this is just an example of an ag sense. But I did this just from the interface standpoint, just to keep it simple here. That when you import it, you just hit the upload button, and most all the controllers almost have something very similar to this. Lindsay, Valley, and I think Ranky's is similar also, where you hit the upload table, you select that CSV file, it automatically imports, nothing else needed, and then you can go in there and customize the name, which I always recommend to do that for your growers. Yeah, and yearly, as Matt said, you might name it something specific if you have multiple prescriptions, and then also add the year, or if you only run in one prescription, just call it 2025 or whatever it may be. But yeah, so Matt said it's also a good idea because for Equip, when they have to run those reports at the end of the year, it's nice to have that prescription loaded so they know which one to go off and print for the reports. The question was, have you had any? I thought it was national too. It's your age. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So right here to that point, we have our underlying management zones, and each wedge is looking for the majority soil type in each one of those zones to determine the application rate, which is basically a percentage of that base rate. So it, yep. So it knows where that base rate again is determined by the majority soil zone. So if it's a light blue like this, the majority underneath the pivot, that's going to be your 1 inch rate. And then everything else is a percentage away from that base rate. The other thing, and I'll just point out too, because it's a kind of a nice little just feature, but when you are, if you do get into the customization of using these locking tool sets, it also is very nice that you can just point and click, and you can hold your shift key down and select multiple slices at once, and then you'll know which one it is. Once you highlight or click on one, it'll highlight itself in the row, so you know exactly which ones to lock. This kind of helps you visually go in and select certain rows. Yeah. So the question is, what if the pie has really diverse zones? Let's say for whatever reason, it's 33% of three different zones. From there, then it's going to be taking an average of those three. You know, it's all the way the algorithm works is it takes it's a weighted percentage of the number of acres in each zone. So, you know, the majority acre, but then it's also taking into account that minority acre, but it's weighted accordingly based on the percentage of acres in that. So if they're all evenly, it's just going to be an average of all. Yep. More or less average itself out. Exactly. Exactly. The total gallons. Yeah, that, and I know that is calculated at the bottom of this table. Yes. So the question was, where can you see like the total gallons? And it might have even been back here. Yeah. It's got total gallons calculated right here. And just like the other guy said, all we need to do is summarize that, have a total for the field. And they asked about that for doing seeding prescriptions too, that we need to add a total. But yeah, then you could compare your VRI rate versus flat rate. Yes, and I didn't build that into the prescription. Um, yeah, tomorrow that will be, there is a wiper option. And now I'm thinking that they might have pulled that out. They might be fixing it. And that's why I didn't see it in here and I forgot to even add it. It should say, when you get to this point, there should be a wiper option up here that you simply click on, just like the VO did. Um, and we had that. If anybody used it last year, right towards the end of the year, there was a little bug in it. And I bet that's why when they fixed it, they either don't have it fixed or they didn't put it back. But there is a wiper option. I'll get that. You do see it? Okay. Yeah. So I'll get that added back. But there's 100%, there's a wiper option. We just got to get that turned back on. Yes. Yep. So when you come in here and we go back to selecting which zones right here, any of those EC zones or anything zones you mapped yourself or the 365 zones for your example, they'll be imported in under machine data. So when you go to the machine data tab under its import function, you can just drag and drop files, you know how you commonly do with the online portals, or you can go select your file through a browser, but then all that will be automatically imported. So when you select machine data, it'll give you a whole list of available files under that machine data, and then you can select those zones right from here. So yes, that's what I highly recommend. Again, starting with EC or some type of topography change zones. Yep. Yep. All EC. In the last session with Avi, we talked about, some different customization features, picking different data layers and being able to weight them, develop a kind of a combined management zone. John Gates had mentioned it, and that's something else we're working on that we might be able to get here fairly soon with the yield analysis aspect. What else? Good questions. I do not think so. I've never tried to push the limit. I'm always, yeah, right around anywhere from, yeah. So Kurt asked if there is a limit on the number of zones, and I don't think there is. But again, you would never select. Yeah, too many. Yeah, management zones. I mean, you're typically going to be running anywhere from 3 to 8 at the most. Probably, I kind of like that 4 to 5, depending on the field and the amount of variability. Yes, you can adjust it. You can select it. And that's the nice thing before you save your management zone or bring it into this VRI step, you can play around with that and see what looks better and how many acres end up being in each zone accordingly. All right. I think that's all I got. The last one just shows how, once you've got the VRI, then you can match it up using the same interface, the same tool. Everything's all saved right here. And then you can match it up and make fertility and seeding scripts all with those same zones and everything's all in one place. So that grower, again, if you remember how I started yesterday before VRI, it felt like a dog chasing his tail in a circle, just running seeding and fertility and putting on one flat rate of water. Well, now you can start with water first and then start to introduce those other inputs to start matching everything up accordingly. That's a great question. So I think what you're saying is as guys start to consider the amount of inputs they're applying on their end rows based on, just the turn row capability and the amount of sunlight, et cetera, I have seen other tools, which I don't think would be hard to add, is you can create just little basically buffer strips and then make it its own rate there. Yes. Yep. Don't have it today, but that is something we've talked about is adding those additional kind of paint by numbers tools, I would call it, to create those individual zones for situations like that. Anything else? Miss anything, Gates? There we go. No, I did not. Oh yeah, right here. The added zones. That was, yeah. I didn't go through that. I was just focused on the VRI specifically, but I'm glad you said that because that's just what the question was. Pretty sure it's under that edit button. Yep, merge zones, split zones. Yes, there's a smoothing tool to smooth the zones. Go down to some Miller's Fields down south and put a big Husker symbol down there. Yeah. All right. Unless there's any questions, that's all I got. Thank you, guys.